There's something about the number 3 that appears in folklore across every culture. 3 knocks, 3 days, 3:33 in the morning. In Southeast Asia, 3:33 a.m. isn't just the witching hour. It's when the boundary dissolves. When Pontianak, those spirits of women who died in agony, slip through the cracks in our reality. When technology becomes their gateway. I've spent months investigating 3 separate incidents across the region. Each one happened at exactly the same time. Before we begin, check your phone's ringer volume, because in the next 20 minutes you'll understand why some calls echo across dimensions and why the Pontianak always calls back. Story 1. The security guard's last shift. Marcus Chen told me his story 6 months after he quit his job at One Raffles Place. The smell of industrial floor cleaners still made him nauseous, he said. Something about that antiseptic scent mixed with recycled air. It brought everything back. Marcus had worked night security for 3 years. 40 floors of empty offices, glass corridors that stretched into darkness, and the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. His routine was precise. Start the first round at 11 p.m., complete it in exactly 47 minutes, then repeat every 2 hours until dawn. He'd timed it obsessively. Routine was everything when you're alone with that much emptiness. Floor 23 had been vacant for 8 months. Some issue with the building's foundation, according to management. Structural concerns that required extensive evaluation. But the elevators still stopped there automatically. Every night, Marcus would hear the soft ding as the elevator paused at 23. Doors opening to darkness, then closing again after exactly 12 seconds. He'd grown used to these quirks. Old buildings have personalities, he told himself. Especially ones built over former burial grounds, though the property management company would never confirm that particular rumor. The night it happened, Marcus was halfway through his 3 a.m. round when his desk phone rang. Not his cell phone, not the emergency line. The old landline that connected to building management, the one that hadn't rung in 6 months. No caller ID, just unknown number glowing on the small display. Marcus almost didn't answer. Company protocol said to let voicemail handle after hours calls, but something about the ringtone sounded wrong. Too sharp, too urgent. "Security desk," he said. "Is this the man who walks the empty floors?" The woman's voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it, like static or wind through leaves. "Ma'am, the building is closed. If this is an emergency, you start your rounds at 11 p.m. every night. 47 minutes to complete the circuit. You skip the water fountain on floor 16 because it drips, and you always check the emergency stairwell doors twice." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Those weren't details anyone should know. He'd never mentioned his route to anyone, never filed reports about his timing. Who is this? "You had coffee at 10:30, black, no sugar. Your ex-wife used to say you drank it like medicine." His ex-wife's name wasn't in any employee files. They'd divorced before he started working here, and he'd never mentioned her to anyone at the building. Marcus checked the call timer on the phone. 4 minutes, 17 seconds. "How do you know?" The line went dead. Marcus sat in the lobby's fluorescent buzz, trying to rationalize what he'd heard. Fatigue could play tricks on the mind. 3 years of night shifts, minimal social contact, the stress of working alone. Maybe he was finally cracking. Security guards burned out all the time. but then he had to complete his round. The elevator rose smoothly through floors 1 through 22. Then, at 23, it stopped. The doors opened to reveal lights blazing in the supposedly vacant floor. Not the emergency lighting he'd expect, but full office illumination as if the space was occupied. Marcus hadn't pressed the button for 23. He stepped out anyway. The hallway stretched longer than he remembered, lined with offices that should have been empty for months. His footsteps echoed strangely, each step sounding like two people walking, as if someone matched his pace exactly. At the far end of the corridor, he heard talking, his own voice, having a conversation with someone he couldn't see. "How long have you been waiting for me?" his voice asked. Marcus stood perfectly still, listening to himself speak to empty air. The response came in that same gentle woman's voice from the phone. "Since the day they moved my grave." He backed toward the elevator, but the hallway seemed to stretch with each step. The distance to the elevator doors never decreased. His own voice continued the conversation he wasn't having, discussing things he didn't remember saying. When Marcus finally reached the elevator, he jabbed the lobby button repeatedly. The doors closed, but not before he heard footsteps following him. Bare feet on carpet, moving faster than anyone should be able to move. The elevator descended normally. When the doors opened in the lobby, Marcus was alone. He checked the security monitors immediately. The camera showed him exiting the elevator on floor 23 at 3:41 a.m., walking the length of the corridor and standing at the far end for 12 minutes. The footage clearly showed him talking, gesturing as if responding to someone just outside the camera's range. Marcus had no memory of those 12 minutes. He submitted his resignation the next morning. The building's new security guard, a veteran with 15 years of experience, lasted exactly 2 weeks before requesting an immediate transfer to day shifts. The position remained vacant for 4 months. The elevator still stops at floor 23 every night at 3:33 a.m., though no one rides it anymore. The building management installed an automated security system instead. But sometimes, delivery workers report hearing voices from the 23rd floor. Always the same conversation. Always a man asking, "How long have you been waiting for me?" And always that gentle reply, "Since the day they moved my grave." The building's lease records show that One Raffles Place was constructed over the former site of Singapore's Hokkien cemetery. The cemetery was relocated in 1961. Plot 23 belonged to a young woman who died in childbirth in 1959. Her grave was never found during the relocation. Story 2. The Nurse's Night Call. Dr. Sarah Chen still flinches at the sound of hospital intercoms. "It's the electronic buzz," she told me. "That split second of static before a voice comes through. That particular frequency takes her back to a night in February when everything she thought she understood about her job changed forever." Sarah worked the graveyard shift in the pediatric wing at Hospital Kuala Lumpur. The overnight hours were usually peaceful. Children slept deeper than adults, and emergencies were rare. The hallways smelled like that combination of antiseptic and the faint sweetness of pediatric medicine. A scent that somehow managed to be both sterile and comforting. Room 314 had been empty since late December. A difficult birth that ended badly. Both mother and baby lost after complications that everyone whispered about, but no one fully explained. Hospital policy required checking empty rooms every 2 hours. A simple walkthrough to ensure nothing was disturbed. The room's phone had supposedly been disconnected after maintenance complained about interference. Static on the line, phantom rings, the usual electronic gremlins that plagued older hospital equipment. Sarah had walked past 314 dozens of times since then. Always dark, always silent, always exactly as it should be. That night, she was updating patient charts when the call button for room 314 illuminated at her station. A soft yellow glow that shouldn't have been possible. Disconnected rooms don't register on the call system. Sarah pressed the intercom button, standard procedure. "This is Sarah at the nurse's station. Is everything all right?" Silence. Then, just as she was about to disconnect, singing. A woman's voice performing a lullaby in Hokkien. The melody both beautiful and deeply wrong. Like someone singing underwater or playing a recording backwards. The song continued for exactly 90 seconds. Sarah found herself counting automatically, a nervous habit from years of medical training. When the singing stopped, the silence felt heavier than before. "Hello?" Sarah tried again. "The baby won't stop crying." The woman's voice was clearer now, but still carried that underwater quality. Sarah glanced at her patient board. No babies were admitted to the pediatric wing that night. The youngest patient was a 4-year-old with appendicitis, sleeping peacefully in room 307. "Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion. What baby are you referring to?" "The one in 314. She's been crying since December." Sarah's training kicked in. Confused patients sometimes called from wrong rooms. Families occasionally got lost in the maze of hospital corridors. She grabbed her keycard and headed down the hall, footsteps echoing against polished linoleum. Room 314's door was closed, but not locked. Sarah pushed it open and reached for the light switch. The fluorescent bulbs flickered on, revealing an empty room exactly as it should be. Standard hospital bed with fresh linens, visitor's chair pushed neatly against the wall, nothing disturbed. But the room was freezing. Her breath came out in small puffs, visible in the sudden cold. The heating system had been working perfectly an hour ago. As Sarah stepped inside, her footsteps sounded different. Each step echoed as if 2 people were walking, her rhythm matched by an invisible companion. She checked the bathroom, the closet, behind the bed, nothing. Then she heard it. Infant crying, soft but persistent, coming from the bathroom she just checked. Sarah returned to the bathroom. Empty, but the crying continued, seeming to move around the room like sound trapped in a box. She pressed her ear to the walls, trying to locate the source. The crying stopped immediately. In the sudden silence, she heard her own voice speaking. "What baby are you holding?" But Sarah hadn't spoken. The words came from behind her, in her exact voice, asking a question she hadn't thought to ask. She turned around. The room was empty. "The one you're holding," came the reply in that underwater voice. Sarah looked down at her arms. For just a moment, less than a second, she felt weight there. The unmistakable sensation of cradling something precious and fragile. When she looked up, a woman stood in the doorway. Pale hospital gown, long black hair hanging over her face, feet bare against the cold linoleum. The woman didn't breathe, didn't blink, just stood there with perfect stillness. "She needs her mother," the woman said. Sarah blinked and the doorway was empty. She ran down the hallway, past the other rooms, straight to the nurse's station where she locked herself behind the counter and called security. When they arrived 12 minutes later, room 314 was exactly as she'd left it, empty, clean, and somehow still freezing despite the heating system working normally. The security guards found one anomaly: wet footprints leading from room 314 to the elevator. Bare feet, size 6, with what looked like blood between the toes. The prints ended at the elevator doors and didn't continue inside. Sarah transferred to day shift the following week. Room 314 was permanently sealed 3 days later. The official reason cited structural integrity concerns requiring extensive renovation. But Sarah knew better. She'd spoken to the head of hospital administration before her transfer. He'd admitted, off the record, that this wasn't the first incident in 314. 3 other nurses had reported similar encounters over the past 2 months, all at exactly 3:33 a.m., all involving the same woman asking about the same baby. The woman's medical records, he said, were incomplete. No next of kin listed, no forwarding address for personal effects. She'd arrived alone and died alone, but someone had been calling the hospital asking about her condition for weeks after her death. The calls always came at 3:33 a.m., always from numbers that didn't exist when the hospital tried to call back. Room 314 remains sealed. The call button still illuminates occasionally on the night shift board, but hospital policy now requires all such incidents to be logged and ignored. The overnight staff knows not to answer. But sometimes, when Sarah visits the hospital for continuing education seminars, she hears singing in the stairwells, always that same backwards lullaby, echoing from floors that should be empty. The song lasts exactly 90 seconds, always stops just before someone goes to investigate. The woman who died in room 314 was 23 years old. Story 3. The library's sublevel. The underground levels of Nanyang Technological University smell like old paper and something else, something organic that the cleaning staff could never quite identify. Maria Santos described it as sweet decay, like flowers left too long in water. She should know. She spent 3 years cleaning those archives before the night that changed everything. Maria led the overnight cleaning crew for NTU's library system. 5 people total, herself, 2 junior staff members, and 2 part-time students who needed the money. They worked the graveyard shift, cleaning and maintaining areas that students never saw. The sub-basement archives were their final stop each night, 3 levels below ground, housing university records dating back to 1955. The building had history. Before becoming NTU, the campus served as a teacher training college. Before that, during the Japanese occupation, it had been something else entirely. Records from that period were sealed in the deepest archive level, B3, accessible only to senior staff with special clearance. Maria's crew cleaned B3 once per week, always as a group. University policy required 2-person teams minimum for sub-basement work, but budget cuts meant solo assignments were becoming common elsewhere in the building. On February 15th at exactly 3:33 a.m., all 5 crew members received identical text messages. The sender showed as NTU Security Administration. The message was simple: emergency maintenance required. Report to sub-level B3 immediately. Use service elevator C. Maria called campus security to confirm. The dispatcher seemed confused. No emergency had been reported. No maintenance was scheduled. And according to their records, no messages had been sent to cleaning staff. But the text messages were there on all 5 phones. Same timestamp, same sender identification. The crew descended together on service elevator C. B3 was darker than usual. Half the fluorescent lights were dead. casting the archive in alternating pools of harsh white light and deep shadow. The air felt thicker down there, heavy with that sweet decay smell Maria had never learned to ignore. It should have been a simple 20-minute sweep, stretched impossibly. Their watches showed different times. Maria's read 3:45, while Jin's showed 4:12, and Anna's had stopped entirely at 3:33. The archive aisles seemed longer than before, stretching into darkness that their flashlights couldn't penetrate. They heard sounds throughout the level, filing cabinet drawers sliding open and shut, metal on metal echoing through the maze of storage units. But every investigation revealed nothing disturbed. Papers remained exactly where they'd been filed. Drawers sat closed and locked. The geometry was wrong. Maria had cleaned these archives for 3 years. She knew every corridor, every junction, every dead end. But tonight, hallways led to rooms that shouldn't exist. Turn left at the historical documents section, and instead of hitting the east wall, you'd find another corridor stretching into darkness. Anna discovered the phone first, an old rotary model sitting on top of a filing cabinet that Maria swore hadn't been there the week before. Black bakelite, cord trailing into shadow, receiver resting in its cradle. The phone was ringing. Not the electronic trill of modern phones, but the mechanical bell of vintage equipment. The sound bounced off the archive walls impossibly, coming from above them, below them, behind them simultaneously. "Should we answer it?" Jin asked. Before anyone could respond, the ringing stopped. The silence that followed felt alive, pressing against their eardrums like water pressure. Maria approached the phone. The filing cabinet it sat on was labeled Personnel Records, Deceased Faculty, 1942 to 1945. She'd never seen this cabinet before. The crew had never been assigned to clean this section. She lifted the receiver. The dial tone sounded like breathing. "Hello," she said into the handset. The response came not through the phone, but from the darkness behind them. "You're exactly on time." The voice belonged to a woman, speaking Hokkien with an accent Maria didn't recognize. Old-fashioned, formal, like recordings from the 1940s. The crew turned toward the voice. In the space between two filing cabinets, they saw her. A young woman in a white blouse and dark skirt, the uniform of the old teacher training college. Her feet were bare, and she stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of her. "The files need to be returned," she said, "before dawn." "What files?" Maria asked, but the woman had vanished. The crew searched the immediate area. No trace of footprints, no disturbance in the dust that coated everything on B3. But when they returned to the mystery filing cabinet, they found it standing open. Inside were personnel files for faculty members who had died during the Japanese occupation. Teachers who had disappeared in 1943, never to return to their families. The files were detailed, meticulous, but wrong. They contained information about deaths that hadn't been documented until decades later. Execution dates that matched historical records that weren't declassified until the 1990s. Someone had been updating these files, recently. The crew left B3 immediately, taking the service elevator back to ground level. When they checked their watches in the lobby, they all showed the same time, 3:34 a.m. 1 minute had passed since they had received the text messages. But Maria's body felt like she'd been working for hours. Her legs ached, her back was stiff, and her throat was dry as if she'd been talking for a long time. Security footage from that night shows the cleaning crew entering B3 at 3:33 a.m. and exiting at 3:34 a.m., 60 seconds total. The cameras never show them separating or exploring different areas. Just 5 people standing motionless in the center of the main archive room for 1 minute. None of them remember standing still. The university sealed B3 the following week, citing environmental hazards requiring immediate remediation. The official work order mentioned asbestos concerns and structural instability. But Maria spoke to the facilities manager off record. He told her they'd found something during the investigation. Filing cabinets that weren't on any inventory lists, documents that shouldn't exist, and a phone that wasn't connected to any line but somehow still received calls. The cleaning staff rotation was permanently adjusted. No crew has been assigned to sub-basement levels since February. The areas are now listed as indefinitely inaccessible on all university maintenance schedules. But students occasionally report strange sounds from the library's lower levels. Always the same time. Always the same mechanical ringing echoing up through the building's ventilation system. The calls last exactly 90 seconds before stopping abruptly. B3 contains 2,847 personnel files. According to the final inventory before sealing, 2,848 filing cabinets were found in the archives. The extra cabinet was never open. 3 different locations across Southeast Asia. 3 different professions. 3 people who had never met, never spoken, never shared their experiences until I reached out to them, yet their accounts share remarkable consistencies. The precise timing, the phone calls that shouldn't have been possible, the sensation of time stretching and compressing simultaneously. Most significantly, each person described feeling like they were participating in conversations they didn't remember having. From a psychological perspective, these experiences align with what researchers call false awakening episodes, moments when the brain hovers between sleep and consciousness, creating vivid hallucinations that feel completely real. Night shift workers are particularly susceptible to these phenomena. Isolation, disrupted circadian rhythms, and the stress of working alone in empty spaces can trigger profound dissociative experiences. There's also the cultural dimension to consider. The concept of 3:33 a.m. as a supernatural threshold exists across multiple Southeast Asian traditions, predating modern telecommunications by centuries. When shared cultural beliefs encounter modern technology, our brains may unconsciously create experiences that validate those ancient fears. Perhaps these incidents represent nothing more than coincidental timing amplified by sleep deprivation and cultural conditioning. 3 isolated cases of workplace stress manifesting through familiar folklore patterns. But that explanation doesn't account for the security footage. It doesn't explain the sealed rooms, the policy changes, or the fact that each location has remained permanently altered by what happened there. I've presented you with the accounts as they were told to me. 3 people, 3 encounters, 3 moments when the ordinary world seemed to crack open and reveal something else underneath. What's your explanation for the consistency across these experiences? And if you've worked night shifts in Southeast Asia, have you ever answered a call you probably shouldn't have?